Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad
Sue,
you're here.
thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Truly an honor to be here. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah, we were just talking before I hit record, and didn't we both say it's like we better hit record here,
I know. We had
or
about
else
a half-hour
we're
talk
gonna
before we
keep.
even started.
I know, I know. So you are a coach, and you are an all-around interesting guy with a great background. So I'm gonna let you briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll just bounce from there.
Yeah, it's funny. That's such a wide open start to the question of the show because I'll be 56 here in like a week, so I've got a few years under my belt, and so I could take that answer in a lot of directions. But I'll sort of start, I guess, maybe to the middle end and say, yeah, I am a coach. I did a long stint in corporate America. I have a business background, business degree, went from banking into consulting, and then had a great run through some really large consulting organizations, Deloitte and EY, and which got me into some other verticals outside of finance, into healthcare of all things, and oil and gas, and some others, working for these great consulting companies. And then I went into industry and was doing business development and working always sort of on the sales and business development and customer relationship management side of things from a career standpoint, even when I was in banking. And started doing that for some healthcare companies, got into the healthcare vertical, elevated in my career, and was working as a CMO, right, Chief Marketing Officer for a men's health company, and having a lot of success. And I'd had a lot of success in my career. At the same time, I think when I turned 50, I started to, for the first time, ask myself some questions of, is this really what I'm destined
Mhm,
and designed and have been built by my creator to do? Am I doing the things that he intended for me to do or hope that I would do? And am I fulfilling and using my gifts and talents the way I could use them, right? For whatever purpose that I was put on the earth, to use them for. And it was the first time I really asked that. And prior to that, it was always just about accomplishment and money and next level achievement, right? So moving up to the next thing. And this was the first time that I really said, is this right? Maybe there's something entirely different. So I hired a coach right before COVID, right? So it was like in 2018. I started working with a coach really with just the intention of working on me. I'd had coaches before to help me from a performance standpoint and how to learn new skills or different things. And it was always provided by my employer. This was the first time I took my own time, my own money to really just be introspective, look at myself and understand, like, all right, when I'm having my best day, what does that day look like?
mhm, mhm,
When I feel the most energized at the end of a long day, what did I do that day? And really started to dig into me and spent a couple of years without really an end state in mind. Just wanted to go on this journey and try to understand more about, myself, and was I living in the true purpose and mission that I was built to fulfill.
mhm,
And then COVID hit, and life got real weird, obviously from a business standpoint, and work continued to be good. Well, like us, like any business, and we were again a men's health practice, and there were some initial questions of, are you essential? Were you going to be allowed to stay open? And then certainly medical was like, yeah, medical can stay open, and we did enough primary care work that we were essential, so we stayed open, never closed during COVID. But I just started to ask, again, is this really what I want to do as I start to look at the last 10 or 15 years of my working life? And I decided to step out and do something that I'd never done before in my life, which was kind of bet on me and bank on me and step into an entrepreneurial role. I really didn't know, even when I left, what I was going to go do. I just felt like I was going to coach people. I knew that when I was doing my best work, I was pouring into other people. I was investing in other people, and it was more about seeing other people grow and thrive and become their best selves,
mhm,
that I found real fulfillment in. It was more that, like, I enjoyed that more than my own even personal achievements, right? It was more about seeing others succeed. So I thought, that's a coach. And yet I do a lot of things. I'm a endurance athlete. I do a lot of, I've qualified for the Boston Marathon a couple times. I've run, 15 marathons and some ultras in there. And so I thought, maybe I coach people fitness wise, how to get healthy. And that didn't really feel right. And so it became more about helping people. It's a blend of helping people professionally and from a business perspective, consider what are they designed to do? What are they using their best gifts and talents from a business standpoint? And are there things that they could do better? Are there things that they could enhance? And then are they fulfilling their life's purpose, their life's mission? So it's this blend of sort of life and business coaching that I've worked with clients on. A lot of my clients look a lot like me. So they're, 40-plus-year-old men, not only men, I've got women too, but I've more men than women that I've worked with. And they're trying to grapple with a challenge or a problem that they're dealing with or some reason. People generally come to coaches when they're having some amount of crisis and or
Yeah.
decision making that's going on. They didn't just wake up and generally like, hey, everything's great. I'm going to hire a coach for the first time. And so,
Yeah.
most of my clients are trying to figure out challenges, right, or some issue. And yeah, and I help them navigate through that and help them go through a series of exercises to uncover, where they need to be spending time and where they want to focus on. So it's been great. And then, some of my work is really business focused around helping teams optimize and be better and do better. And some of that is by having a clear vision and a mission, right? The same similar tactics around an individual, helping them figure out vision and mission, working with a team and figuring out how's that team need to be aligned. And some of it's business development skills for professionals. Having come out of consulting organizations, I know very well what that looks like, and I'm able to apply those skills to businesses in a similar way, or enhance business development skills. So it's been great, man. It's the entrepreneurial venture is not for the faint of heart, right? And if I look at my own personality assessment, if you follow it, like a DISC is a really good
Yeah.
traditional a program that I love. I'm a big fan of the DISC model. There's
Yeah,
others that
me
are really
too. Me
good, but
too.
I love DISC. And I'm a heavy CS, right? So I'm conscientious and I'm stable, steady, which is not generally how entrepreneurs are wired because entrepreneurial is like chaos at all times and very
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The high
at
D.
all time.
Yeah.
The high Ds are
Yeah, the
typically
high D,
entrepreneurs.
high Cs,
Yeah.
low S's. So I'm surprised on
Yeah.
that one because I'm a high D, high I, and high C. So I'm
That's interesting because I's and
pretty
C's generally don't go together, right? You see a lot of DI and a lot of DC. I've got a
yeah,
little bit of D from that's kind of from that C, but it's
yeah.
really much more. I'm much more weighted toward the CS, but so
Okay.
steady,
I have a
stable, conscientious. I'll
low
get it
C.
done right. Analyze to
S,
death.
low S.
And so, yeah, so it's been a challenge. For certainly, I've learned a massive amount as I've gone on my own hero's journey, and trying to uncover and discover, more about myself. And it's been cool. And the learning experience. I've been doing it now 3 years in July. So I stepped out of my corporate role July 2021, and so this will be 3 years this July. So coming up on it, and yeah, it's been awesome.
Oh, wow. So you talked about hero's journey, which if people aren't familiar with that,
Mm.
that is the journey where you feel like this calling, this longing, there's something going on in yourself that is that drive, to go forward. And for you, your hero's journey has been one of like an upward spiral, some setbacks you mentioned there. So you have a belief that hard things teach us great lessons.
Mm.
How has that belief played out in your life and your journey?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. I mean, yeah, go back to the hero's journey. I mean, the hero's journey is how all great story is told, right? So if you look at classic stories like Star Wars, a great example of the hero's journey. Luke Skywalker, the hero's journey is a circular event that starts off like the hero resisting the call to adventure, right? So if you think about the beginning of, for me, would have been Star Wars 1. For folks that grew up a little younger than me, it would have been, I think, Star Wars 4, which is ridiculous. But the first, when Luke Skywalker is on Tatooine and he's being called by Ben Kenobi to like, hey, come with me, and he's like, no, I can't do that. I got to stay here with my family. I got to take care of my aunt and uncle and live
What
in
would be the parallel for you
a
then
sand
to
pit.
Star Wars? Would that be staying in the corporate
It's
job?
Yeah, it was kind of resisting this call to do something, outside of that corporate world. And because I just knew that space really well and I'd had a lot of success in it. So it's hard to go, well, why would I leave something I'm having a lot of success in, to go do something that, I've never done before and is very kind of strange, right? And very unknown. And for someone with that likes the steady, likes the, high conscientiousness and high steady, that felt really good, that steady. But it also, there's some dissonance in there too, right? Where I would achieve things and feel like, oh, this is going to make me kind of quote unquote happy or feel fulfilled or feel like, oh, I can take a breath. And it just never did. I was always kind of like next challenge, next thing. And
Mhm.
the anxiety and this kind of the tension around that, not really anxiety, but more just the constant sort of tension was always there. I never really felt satisfied, never felt like, oh, okay, now I've reached it, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so there was that resistance, and then the hero in the hero's journey eventually gives in and drops into the unknown, right? Drops into the woods, into the darkness, and bumps around and skins his knees, and has some little battles and wins and keeps going, but still is fairly lost. And then meets a mentor that is essential to helping them move forward, right? And that mentor teaches some things, and then usually they come to a major crossroad and they can't go forward, and they even with the help of the mentor who's sort of guiding, they need another level guide. They need someone that can say, I've been here, follow me, and I'll take you past this particular roadblock, right? And then you got to fight the big baddie, right? Whoever the big baddie is. For Luke, it was he had to figure out who Darth Vader was, his dad, and fight his dad and all that, and then figure out in after that fight happens and you win, what is this magical elixir? What is this thing that you're going to find in the woods, in the darkness, to bring back to the world to make the world better, right? That's the hero's journey. And you come back to the light and you're now this kind of changed, being, and you've brought this thing back that never would have been brought back had you not taken that initial step into the unknown. That's the beauty of the hero's journey. So when you ask that question, where do I see myself in that? Right. So it was the resistance to leaving sort of that
Right.
steady, stable, predictable thing. And
How did you overcome the resistance then?
it
What
was working with a coach, right? So when
Mhm.
my coach helped me in doing those reps and doing that work and really asking myself those questions that I'd never asked before. That's what helped me to take that step into the unknown, right? That's ultimately what led me to go, okay, I'm going to do it. And there was enough tension and just stuff going on in where I was, that it was like, okay, it's time to try something and really see where this leads me. And again, to me, and I would say this now after 3 years, I wouldn't have probably said this 2 years ago, but I don't know if where I am right now is where I'm ultimately going. In fact, I
Mhm.
think it may not be, right? I think this is yet another step on the hero's journey and the path that I'm discovering and uncovering as I go, because I'm finding things that I never would have anticipated 2 or 3 years ago, as being opportunities. One of which, as I lead a men's rites of passage event, so basically an outdoor hard experience that is designed to help men kind of understand, what are they being called to do as fathers and husbands and brothers and community members. What is their role? And it was nothing I ever had imagined. It sort of kind of came to me.
Mhm.
And yet I'm getting more and more people asking me, hey, could you do one of those for me over here? Could you run it for me, for my company, or for my sales team, or my let's continue to like lean in. Let's do this event thing. And I keep, as much as I resist it and go, I don't know if that's really what I want to be doing, it just keeps coming back up, right? And so I see that as being something that I don't really know where that's going to go, but it
Yeah.
seems like it's just continuing, like we talked before about feeling like God is having an influence, and yet you don't really see it, but then you
You know it's
keep
there. Yeah.
trusting it and just keep stepping into it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's there, and then eventually it's revealed, right? So
Yeah, there's almost a theme of surrender to your
mm,
story, just surrendering to what
yeah,
comes your way, but,
and I don't
I
surrender well. It's
have
not
you
it's
now
not
have you read Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment?
No, but I have another book, called The Magic of Surrender
No,
by,
no, no, you have to read his book.
oh,
Yep,
yeah?
I'm sorry. Yeah,
The
yeah.
Magic of
Well,
Surrender is pretty good
Austin,
too.
you know what? Austin told me that was one of the books when we first started coaching. That was one of the books he told me I had to read was The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. Changed my life.
Mm,
It really did. It was one of those because I'm a control freak by nature. I
yeah,
want to know how things are going. I
me
want
too.
things to be orchestrated the right way. I want this to occur this way. This is the way it should be. You play out the scenario in your brain. I don't know if you do that. Maybe I'm the only one who does that, where you play out that scenario. It's like, I want this thing to go that way, and it doesn't. So after I read this book, I thought, and the way he spells it out in the book is just the story is amazing. It's just an amazing story. So I'm not going to give it all away, but the basis of the book obviously is the surrender experiment where Michael Singer went and instead of trying to orchestrate everything in his life, surrendered to the flow of life and allowed things to come their way, which is what you're describing. That's what's happening
Sure.
in your life, Eric, is like people like new season where people are asking you to do these things. As you surrender to that, you notice it starts growing more and more. So as I started surrendering in my own life, I started to see things happening that I could not have imagined. It opens up possibilities in areas where you didn't see possibility before when you learn to surrender and let life flow the way it's going to flow. Like where my life is today, I could not have imagined in January of this year. And
Yeah.
we're at the end of May.
Yeah. Yeah. For
So
sure.
just surrendering to that.
It's tough, and I don't know if it's
Yeah,
high
it is hard.
achievers or what it is, but the idea that no, I'll control this, I'll drive this, I'll do
Yeah,
what I have to do to get to the finish line. All those things, lean on myself, look to myself, all that stuff. That's all anti-surrender. That's all anti
yeah.
trusting God. I
S-
would frame that as trusting in God and trusting that, if God knew me in my mother's womb, if he stitched me and knows every hair on my head, well,
Right.
he had a plan, right? He didn't just kind of like, man, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
throw this one out there, see what happens. He had a plan, he has a plan. And to trust in that plan for me was really hard, right? It's like, nah,
Sure.
I like the idea of it, but I'm just going to keep driving forward here.
You know what? There's a fine line though between surrendering to
Mm,
it and what you actually do have to do to put things in motion and what you
yes,
have to do to actually get something done. I mean, there is that line, right? It's like if you have people coming to you, then you have a choice with that. Do you choose to lean into it
right.
and meet a need that's in front of you, or do you walk away from the need and say, well, that's not for me? And I mean, that it's always a hard decision, right? It's whether and it's helpful to have somebody walk with you if you have a coach and
Yeah,
you're going through this journey,
yeah.
that to help somebody kind of get you out of your own way. What are some things that you do to help you get out of your own way? Because you talked about the
Mm,
hero's journey, you made that switch, you now went from corporate, now you're going into this other season of life. What are
mm,
some things that were in your toolbox along the way?
yeah. Prayer is a big thing for me, right? And spending time in prayer um and asking God, for guidance and really, I've almost my prayers have changed over time. Where I used to pray for the answer, like show me the answer, give me the answer.
Yeah.
And now I more pray for like the acceptance, like to have the patience to be accepting, to continue. Like you said, you've got to. I believe that we're called to exert. Like I have energy, right? I have energy. I've been gifted with a drive and energy and a brain, and so I'm called to use those things, right? And not be lazy and just sit around and like I'm waiting for my ship to come in, because I don't
Yeah.
really subscribe to that. I think we have to get to work. And but then it's like when opportunities do come my way, I ask myself, does this align with who I am as a person? Does it align with my core values? Um, is it going to be something that I'm proud of if I look back in a year, whether it's successful or not? Will I be proud of the effort, the work, the people, the thing that we're doing? And that wasn't always the case. Like I didn't do that in earlier opportunities. It was more about what's the money look like,
Mm,
what's the financial opportunity, is it going to take me away from my family too much, right? Knowing that it's probably going to take me away from my family some, but is it, like, is it an okay balance? But it was really more about like, can I go make money at this
mm,
thing? And it was really heavily based on that. As I've kind of come to know myself, I mean, that's a thing for me, right? It's that scarcity mindset, which was really impressed upon me from a young age, because my dad, who is an awesome dad, grew up very, very poor, right? And really
mhm,
questioned where the next meal was coming from, and also with a violent father. And
mm,
so it didn't really pay him at all to be noticed, known, seen. He didn't pay him to take risks, because risks were often met with a beating. Whether you, if
yeah.
certainly if you failed, but even if you did good, there would almost be a beating too. And so he grew up with this kind of, sort of scarcity mindset of like, look, just stay off the radar. And he was a high performer as well, but it was like, I just trying to stay off the radar. And that got impressed upon me, and
Mhm.
again, I don't, that's not a fault of my dad's. It's just it was
Yeah.
his environment, but I took it on almost as my own. And so I have this kind of scarcity mindset is really impressed upon me, and that's where it goes back to a bit of that achieving a goal and accomplishing a bonus or some kind of financial thing that I thought was going to make me feel good or comfortable just became, well, I just need to go make more. So I'm just going to set that over here and just go make more, and set that over here and go make more, because I never know, might run out of money, even though it's like, yeah, there
Yeah.
doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I still have that fear of it. So, you know, that became more of a, all right, instead of just making every decision be about how much money can I make because money's going to make me comfortable or happy, it became, does it align with my core values? Does it align with my faith? Does it align with the people, align with who I want to be known for and known around, or not,
Mhm.
and so, that changed for me, right? That sort of analysis and consideration has really evolved in the last, number of years, 5 years, say.
Mhm. Yeah, you mentioned core values
Mm.
behind what you do and a lot of the driver behind decisions. What are some of your core values, your top ones
Yeah.
that drive your decisions?
Yeah. So for me, and it started off when I did this exercise, I loved all the words, right? So many core values. And I thought, gosh, I can't even remember them all because there's too many, right?
Yeah,
So I
I
had to
think
kind of cull it down. And I came to this group of three, which was Christianity, integrity, and grit, right? And Christianity really encompassed a lot of things for me, because I had things on there like humbleness and patience and persistence. And I thought, well, those are really Christian values, right? I mean, being
Mhm.
humble, being patient, being persistent. Those are Christian things. So rather than try to have three, I'm just going to summarize that into one. And then I eventually got on down to where it was just Christian. That it all falls under Christianity. But then I thought that's too. It's like it doesn't. It says everything and then nothing at the same time, because it could be so broad.
Mhm.
So Christianity, certainly, though, I mean, it has to align with my faith. And then the grit piece is important to me, right? Because so this goes to endurance sports, having a grit mindset, having that. You mentioned it earlier, Sue, about I believe that doing hard things is valuable. And I do believe hard things are really valuable. And whether it's a physical thing or taking a risk, which is something that's newer to me. I've taken risks in my career before, but this is the biggest risk by far I've taken. And so, but I think there's value in it, because with big risk comes big learning, not necessarily big wins, but big learning. And learning is a win, right? So you've got to
Mhm.
sometimes connect those dots, and it may not be apparent right away that this was a good thing. And yet, in hindsight, even some of our biggest challenges we see often as, oh, that taught me something I never would have
Yeah.
learned, right?
Yeah.
But it often requires hindsight. So that goes back to, you got to be patient to get to that hindsight, right? To be able to have that distance from it so you can see it. Um, and then integrity, right? So that's a big one. It's just, and that's, I think, a very common one for people. I just think it's got to be front and center. This notion that I do what I say I'm going to do. You can trust me when I speak, that I'm speaking the truth, and that that my word is valuable. That I
Mhm.
hold it sacred and valuable, and that I want you to understand that too. That when I say something, I mean it. And so those three things are really sort of those core values that I now, when I'm considering client work or opportunities and things, it goes to that. Um,
Mhm.
you know, somebody asked me this just the other day. We had an exercise, and it was actually through GoBundance, right? So the question was posed, and I love it, and it's because it really helps to. It's an eye opener. It was for me. Was, if you're laying on your deathbed, what is a regret that you're going to have on your deathbed that you will have right now, based on your life right now? What will you regret? And I said, anything that takes me out of the path of growing closer to God and my relationship with Jesus Christ, or my family or my community, anything that takes me out of that path, I will regret that time. Right. So you hear about people on
Mm.
their deathbed, like no one's ever like, I wish I went to one more meeting, or
Yeah.
wish I did more email, and so, all that stuff, right? Everybody's like, I had more relationship time, right? More time with people, more time with
Yeah.
people I love, doing the things that I love. And so, certainly that reflects out for me, but it's like, anything that took me out of that path of growing closer to God or closer to my family, my spouse, my children, my community, my brothers, my sisters, and my community. Anything that took me out of that path, I'll regret. I'll look back and go, man, that was a waste of time. If it wasn't investing in those things, it was a waste of time. And
Mm.
time is a really perishable thing. It's going away. Every second is we draw 1 second closer, to our end on the earth, right? And the whole notion of memento mori, if you're familiar with that,
Yeah, oh,
right?
yeah, very much so, yes.
So
Momentum.
I love that, right?
Love
And
that, yeah, I love it too,
it's
and
just
tell everybody what that means,
yeah,
momentum.
yeah. So it's just this, it's having an awareness that, remember you will die. Remember your
Yeah,
death is coming. And so it's not designed to be morbid. It's designed to be life-giving, right? Because if you remember you're going to die, you're less likely to waste time now.
yeah,
You're less likely to be upset, angry, and frustrated at stupid stuff, right? Because it's like, well, I remember this vividly. My grandmother's home back in Buffalo, New York, where I was born and where I lived till I was 12, she had a wall in her home of all these faces, portraits of family members. Like I don't even know what most of these people who they were, but they were like black and white photos, really old photos, and they all look kind of stern or grumpy. And me as a kid, I was like, man, these people just don't look that happy, and
yeah,
I guess they're just old, unhappy people, but they really weren't. At some point, they were young people and they probably had dreams and goals and stuff that they loved and favorite ice cream and things they like to do. But now they're just a picture on a wall and they're gone. Right. And so certainly now, that memory is 45 years old. Those people are long, long gone. And so any of the stuff that they were twisted up about, angry about, frustrated, holding a grudge about, it's all gone, man. It's all
doesn't matter.
irrelevant. It doesn't
Yeah, it doesn't
matter.
matter,
So
yeah.
why are we letting ourselves be twisted up because the barista at Starbucks didn't look us in the eye or say hello? Maybe she's having a
There
rough
you
day
go.
herself. Maybe give some grace, give some mercy to people, even if they're not giving it to you, right? Because you don't know what's causing that to happen. Instead of just
Right,
responding with anger or I'm going to show you, you're going to be mean to me, I'll be meaner to you, and have it spoil half of my day. Wow, what a waste of time, right? What a waste
yeah,
of energy.
yeah,
And memento mori just helps me to remember, I'm like, bro, it's coming. And so love every second and feel good about every second that you're here. Whatever it is you're doing, find the joy in it. Even if it
mhm,
sucks in the moment, sucks in
yeah,
terms of like it's hard, or scary or miserable, or if you're on an endurance run and something's really messing you up and you got 30 miles to go or whatever it is, it's like, man, but we're out here, we live for this shit, like we
yeah,
live for this hardness, for this
yeah.
challenge.
Well, that's where the grit comes into,
Yeah.
and, the momentum mori. I tell myself, "Carpe punctum," seize
Mm,
the moment. So you've got carpe diem, which is seize the day, but then I heard carpe punctum, and I thought, "You know what? You only have this moment.
yeah.
You really only have this moment."
Right.
And how often do we project ourselves into the future? We worry about something that may or may not even be,
Mm, and
and
often
how you
never is.
and often never is. Sometimes it's sometimes you do have to plan. I mean, you have to be realistic in there too, but I think a lot of our thoughts from time, we allow them to wander and we allow them to go to this fantasy land where that thing that you're worrying about, really, that worst case scenario rarely ever happens.
Right.
And the stuff that's in the past is in the past. You can't change it. We only have this moment. You and I only have this moment right now on the podcast. Don't know where the
Yep.
rest of the questions are going to go
100%.
to 15 minutes from now, but we have this moment right here, right now. And you talked about grit too, and just working it out. But there's another side, and I was wondering what your thoughts on this are. There's another side of um the grinding portion where you hear people say, well, don't grind. Like,
Mm,
that's not necessary to do. Just do everything with ease. Like, you don't grind it out. So there's the opposite sides. Do you understand where I'm coming? Like,
mhm.
the question in there is like, you're hearing that, well, if you're gritting and grinding and it's hard to do, then you're doing it the wrong way. What are your thoughts on that, being somebody who's very driven like that? Can you be driven and not have the grit?
Yeah.
Or do you need the grit in order to be driven?
Yeah, that's a great question. To me, there's a lot of nuance in it. The reality is if we're doing hard things that we acknowledge are hard, but we're able to smile through them and recognize, man, this is hard and it sucks and it's rough, but we live for it. Like this is awesome. This is why we get it on every day. I think that's good. I think that's a good mentality, right?
Good grit.
To good grit, right? As
The good
opposed
grit.
to, because I used to have this mentality of I can grind to the point, I maybe there's a difference here between grit and grind, but I can grind, meaning I can suffer. I can get to that ugly place and stay in it. But it was hard, but I was like proud of the fact that like that's part of me is I can
Mhm.
grind through the difficult. And I don't know. I think the better attitude is I love the challenge. Like the challenge is my friend. It's
Yeah.
not like if I think of and a good friend of mine, Brian said, said this to me once, um, that we make friends with challenge, right? We don't suffer through it. We make friends with it. And when it comes, we recognize like there's my old friend, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it in terms of being a friend, like we're not trying to get to the end with a friend, right? We're not like, I just got to get through this to the end. Well, I can grind
Yeah.
through it to the end, it'll be gone. Or I got to find that exit ramp, or I'm looking for a reason to leave the room. If you're my friend, well, I want to spend time with my friends, right? I want to hang out with my friends. And if you're a challenge and I'm okay and I treat you as a friend, well, it's like, come on, let's go. Let's hang out. Let's do this together. And it's just a slightly different mindset, I think, between grit and grind. Now, I do think that if we feel like we're forcing something, right? This is where some of that grind thing is like, nah, I'm just gonna be, I think this is right. So I am gonna grab hold of this thing
Mhm.
and drive it to the end no matter how many obstacles, people I have to run over, things I have to do that just maybe are not feeling quite right, but doggone it, I said I was going to get to the end and I'm going to grind it out. That's where I think the whole notion of no, man, take your foot off of someone's throat or this or the, or the throat of this thing that you think just has to be done and be accepting that maybe this isn't for you. Maybe this
Mhm.
isn't, what God's calling you to do or what you're designed to do. And maybe it's really for someone else to do. Right. So just be more accepting maybe of what is happening. And then I can't remember who I was talking with about this idea that, man, the more I sort of like walk away from some things, the more I get pursued by them. It's like that whole rites of passage thing I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
The more I'm like, I just don't know if this is for me long term. It's been cool, but I don't know if I want to. That more and more people are like,
And
no,
more and more yeah, they flock to
like,
you. Yeah.
golly, if I was pressing to get this done, it may be harder to do as opposed to like I'm going the other way and it's coming after me. And so I think there's again, maybe it's a blended answer, but there's nuance to the difference, I think, between grit and
Sure.
grind. I
Yeah,
think
I
it's
like
just
that grit and
a mindset,
grind. Yeah, yeah, I
mindset.
like that. I like that. And that, you said about the more you walk away from something and it pursues you, would you consider that like evidence that you really should go and pursue that thing if it's coming after you? Or how do you
I
view
don't know,
something
girl.
like that?
I don't think that's an easy one either. The reality is because I think there's evil out there too, and I think evil's after
Sure.
us as much as goodness is after us, right?
Sure,
And so
isn't but you know what? You know what, Eric? Shouldn't it really just come back to filtering it through your core
yeah,
values and see if if the thing that's
100%.
pursuing you stands up to what your core values are or what your virtues
Right.
are or what feels really it feels what feels right to you down deep. I got an interesting question about integrity. You mentioned that as
Mm,
being one of your core values and that to do what you say you're going to do and follow through with that. Have you come across circumstances where you said you were going to do something, but then course correction had to happen and you can't follow through with that? How do you butt that situation up against the core value of integrity and still be able to walk that thing through, even though realizing that it's not a good idea to have it play out the way you said?
yeah. Yeah, that's well framed. I mean, the I think the answer there is you have to be transparent and honest, right? So if it's like, hey, I'm going to do it this way, or I'm going to accomplish this thing, and then you're 8 tenths in or 5 tenths in or whatever, and you realize, man, this is just not going to happen, or it's not good, not the really the best outcome that we thought it was going to be at the beginning. I think if you're, from my standpoint, if I were communicating that openly and saying this is what I'm seeing now from my experience and what's happened in the steps since we started and where I think we need to go instead of where I thought we needed to go. And that's the direction that I'm comfortable taking it. If I'm being open and transparent and honest about that, that's also showing integrity. And it may, even if I'm okay with the fact that the person I may be sharing it with or the group might say, well, then that's not cool for you to stay involved. Like, then you
Mhm.
need to go. then I would be like, Roger that. Like that's fair. And, and agree to, part ways. I think as long as I feel like, and not feel like, as long as I am being honest and open and transparent with my intention or vision, and seeing and seeing where I believe we should be going, and communicating that, and recognizing that it may require a parting of the ways, or it may require,
Mm.
whatever
Whatever. Whatever the outcome is,
neutral
right?
outcome is, that, and I'm okay with it. That is having high integrity, right? Because that, to me, that's integrity is about, you do the thing that's required, you do the right thing, and you do the thing that's required, even despite, negative apparent consequences, whether it's financial or professional or some other thing that happens, that people are like, oh, he's a bad guy now, or whatever. And you're like, no, it just doesn't align with who I am. And
Mhm.
so I'm okay with you assessing me now as either a bad guy, or not, performance oriented, or whatever, or not going to get paid, or whatever it might be. I'm okay with that, because it's the right decision, because it doesn't align with who I am, right? And
Mhm.
it's not the right thing I believe that we should do. But if you disagree, cool, you go do that. But I'm not going to, right? And I think so. I think that's also a high integrity person is willing to do that, right? They're willing to
Mhm.
show themselves that way.
Yeah, thanks for bringing more dimension to the word integrity, because sometimes we hear that and it's like, well, just say what you're going to do. That's it. And it can be very black and white.
Mm,
And so if somebody is taking that in and they're going, well, I said I was going to do that thing come hell or high water, I think there has to be a level of awareness there too, to understand that, wait a minute, I said I was going to do this thing, but now this has been presented and this is what we need to do to course correct. And hopefully the course correction is in people's better interest
yeah.
than continuing on that path that you said that you were going to do. Sometimes you have to change it. And you made a good point. It falls on the other person. It's not, you've done to the best that you can do to your ability. The change or course
Mm,
correct was not for malice. It wasn't, there wasn't any malice to begin with, or any kind of deception or anything,
right.
to begin
Intention
with. So
to,
yeah,
yeah.
intention to. Where does authenticity, in your view, fit into all this that we've been talking about?
Yeah, it's interesting because, so I have a podcast called Return to
Yeah, yeah,
Authenticity.
yeah, I know. I was
Okay,
gonna ask you
appreciate you
about your
mentioning
podcast.
that. Appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
actually, yeah, your podcast is called Return to Authenticity, and you know what? I was gonna ask you, what's the drive behind the name of your podcast? And talk about the rewarding aspects of
mm,
your podcast, Return to Authenticity, and then where authenticity comes into play in all this,
yeah.
so put a
Yeah,
nice bow on it.
yeah, right on. So Return to Authenticity, I interview guests that have these incredible stories of making a life change, a life pivot of some sort. It's often brought out by something traumatic or challenging, a death, a divorce, a loss of a job, and or sometimes even it's they're successful, but they feel like they're not who they were designed to be. It's
Mhm,
a similar theme to what we've been talking about, because it's where I was in my life when I was trying to discern, what am I doing with my God-given gifts and talents, and am I doing what I was put on the earth to do, and then made a change. Um, and so that's what the podcast is about. And I wanted to, I'm a big podcast fan. I love listening to podcasts. Although it's interesting now that I've dedicated so much time to podcasting, I listen less. There's only so many hours in the day.
yeah, me too. I do the same
But
thing too.
yeah, and so I as a fan of podcasting, I thought would dream about, as I was listening to a show, like if I were doing a show, what would it be about? And I wanted to put something out that was very positive and enlifting and inspiring, because I feel like there's so much negativity in social media and the news, and you just can't open a social media app without seeing somebody telling a story about how someone else is stupid or an idiot or ruining the world or ruining the country or whatever. And everybody hates everybody. And it's like, man, there's so much negativity. And yet when I hang out, my golden retriever's knocking on the door here. Um, when I hang out in the world, I don't see that, right? I see a lot of people that are really good to each other and generally get along and very kind-hearted. So I thought, I think the social media thing is just sort of biasing us toward, we all must be bad people when we're really not. And so I wanted to counter that and provide these stories of people doing really awesome things. And so that was the initial thing. And then it was also, as I started to look into being a coach, like, okay, these stories will be inspiring to my clients who may be going through some challenge and some darkness, to see, oh wow, she went through this thing that was way worse than what I'm going through, and look, now she's doing all this cool stuff. So there's hope for me, right? So I thought it would be inspiring for my clients, and then it would be inspiring for me, and again, in my own journey, right, and fuel me. So that's kind of the impetus of it. And I've just recorded yesterday my 114th show. And there's about, I think, number 92. Just, I put out a new show every Wednesday. Number 92 went on the platform yesterday. So I got quite a few in the can,
Mhm.
and trying to whittle through that. I went through a season of recording heavily, but not producing, because I was trying to find a producer, and determined to find one and not keep producing my own show. And that resulted in some delay, as it took me longer to find a person than I thought it would. But anyway, so love that platform. And then, authenticity for me, it goes back to that again. It's that integrity, that transparency. It's like being who you were created to be. I feel like often we put on, different veils or
Yeah.
disguises to mask who we really are, in order to kind of quote unquote fit in as we think we're supposed to fit in the world. But it's not really who we are. And so this idea that the more we can strip away the stuff that's not really us, that's not true, that's not who we are, and get to our core authentic self, is the most accurate, not maybe accurate's not the right word, the most true reflection of who we were built and created by God to be, right? So it's this trying to return. And I think it can be, in the world that we live in, challenging to get down to the truest of true essences of your authentic self. But the closer we get to that, the more accurate is, the more reflective it is of who God designed us to be and built us to
Mhm.
be. And so that's where authenticity for me comes up, right? It's trying to make sure, again, that I'm not being somebody who I'm not, right? I'm
Mhm.
always being honest and true to myself, to my core values, to my creator, and to my family and friends.
What were some of the things you did to strip away to get down to your authentic self?
Yeah, the core value piece was sort of a foundational piece. Really, that was the first time as a working corporate America, you see lots of core values on the walls everywhere,
Yeah.
and even simple things. I love cars, right? I'm a car fan, and quirky cars and cool cars and all sorts of cars. If they have character, I'm kind of into it. And Volvo. If I said Volvo, you immediately think of the word. What's the word that comes to mind?
Uh, German engineering boxy car. I remember Volvos
Boxy
used to be
car, right? Safe. Yeah,
boxy.
people
They
say
were
safe or safety, right?
safety.
Or
Yeah.
box.
Oh, yeah,
They
yeah.
were kind of a box, especially their early versions. But so you'd say safety. So if Volvo is really about safety, but their core value was like speedy or, sexy or whatever, you'd be like, well, that doesn't line up, right? That's
Yeah.
not true. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've worked for organizations where you look at the core values and you're like, man, we don't live half of that stuff, right? And so for me, it's like, well, if I spend time analyzing and thinking about what are my core values, well, then I need to live that stuff. That's got to be really kind of core to who I am. And so that was a piece of getting back to like authentic self, is understanding at my core, who am I, what do I value, what do I say I value, and what do I truly value. What am I, if it was the opposite, so back to the Volvo thing, if somebody said we're Volvo and we're sexy, and I would be like, well, that's not true, right? So what things,
Right.
if somebody said our core values of mine don't resonate, you know what would not be true, and let's make sure that we take that stuff away and get down to that essence of me. So that core value exercise was important. I also do an exercise called perfect day, which is really about understanding, if I had a perfect day, if your day was perfect, and nobody's day is ever perfect, but if you could design it and you had
Perfect.
no limits around time or space, what would that day look like? um, that was a helpful exercise for me. Like, did it involve being around people? Was it specific people? Was it friends? Maybe was it alone time? Was it reading? Was it exercise? Was it prayer? Was it time in church? What did my perfect day include? Well, those things are probably good glimpses and nuggets into who I am as a person, if that's where I'm assessing is the things needed to have a perfect day.
Mhm.
And so that, again, was another great tool to help me figure out, like, who am I authentically, what am I about? And yeah, so some of those types of things.
What would you say then, like, when you designed your perfect day, but it is a perfect day, but it's not a perfect day. Whereas, like, it's really what you want it to be, but it doesn't work out that way necessarily. How do you set that up in your mind so that your mind isn't saying to itself, "Well, that's a perfect day. You're never gonna go there. So why are you setting up that perfect day?" It almost seems like a contradiction in a way. You're trying to convince yourself this is a perfect day, but it doesn't always happen. What do you do for yourself
Yeah.
to, rectify that?
Yeah, yeah. So the goal with that perfect day exercise wasn't so much to like create a tactical roadmap of like this is what my day's got to be in order for me to
Mm,
feel like happy. It was more looking for components of again removing time or space. So if I said my perfect day is I want to run, I get a nice 2 hour run in. I want to be able to go to church. I want to spend time and have a nice long breakfast with my wife. I want to be able to see my kids. I want to go to the mountains. All these things. You're like,
right.
well, that's a 40-hour day that you just crammed into 24. How is
There
that
you
going
go. So
to?
maybe it's not day. Maybe it's just a perfect, we'll call it day, but with no time requirement.
Exactly. No
So
time and space
no
requirement.
time.
And so,
Oh, nice.
yeah,
Right. Yeah,
yeah,
that makes it
totally.
very
And
easy.
so then it was like, then it's just, okay, if that's what my perfect day looks like, and then I analyze at the end of a week, like how many different components of my perfect day did I get this week? Well, I got like 80% of them. And yet I was upset or angry most of the week. Like, why? What was I upset
Yeah.
about? I got 80% of my perfect day done. The stuff that I'm saying without limitation of time or space is what I need to feel like this is, oh man, this is the stuff that I define as a perfect day. It feels like Christmas morning. Why am I upset about? That
Yeah.
guy in traffic or the email I got or a text that somebody sent or didn't send. And like, what?
That stuff's low hanging fruit, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you really think about it, that, like an upsetting text or something. Now, obviously, if you get bad news, you got to deal with it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody sending like a stupid
Mm,
text or something like that. And I trick myself. I would say trick myself, but when things like that happen, that I would consider low hanging fruit, the traffic, things like that.
mm,
I always repeat to myself, and I got this from Austin. He told me put it on a 50-year timeline. He's
mm.
like, "In 50 years, won't matter. 100
Right.
years won't matter." I don't know if it was Austin or maybe it was a Alex Hormozy thing. 50 years, it won't matter. I'm 52 years old. I most likely won't be around when I'm 102. And if I
Right.
am around when I'm 102, I'm not going to give a rat's rump,
Yeah.
So in 50, so I can say to myself, in 50 years, will this matter? Like if my neighbor's being a jerk or they're
Yeah.
doing something or something's happening up the street, I say, in 50 years, will it matter? Nope, not
Yeah.
one bit.
Yeah.
Not one bit. And really, does that put that into perspective? And when I tell myself in 50 years, will it or will it not matter? I challenge myself to think of legacy. What
Mm.
am I doing today? Am I leaving something that's going to be useful to somebody tomorrow and leave a mark on them in a positive way? So getting angry at a text, not
Totally.
necessarily. Doing a podcast or working for a business or helping somebody grow something or, just being available for a friend, where's the ROI on that? Far greater
100%.
than using your brain to worry about something that's either not gonna happen or something you shouldn't be worried about.
Yeah. Memento mori, right? It's all going
Yeah,
away. So let's
yeah,
spend all the moments that we have, doing good, feeling good, doing good. And again, life throws, it's not to be a Pollyanna. This is, life is going to throw some gnarly
sure.
challenges at us. And recognizing that even in that challenge, that's part of the beauty of life. That is the life in this world that we're in. It's a broken and tragic world in many regards, and it's a beautiful world too. It's both. And so, and not allowing our happiness to only come from the things that we initially maybe perceive as happy. This is where I've
Right,
had some conversations with people that struggle with this concept of um, man, when you're in the middle of a throes of something that you would assess as being bad, how do you grapple and go, okay, this is being done for me, not to me,
right, right.
right?
That's
That
the
sounds like, how do you do that? And it's like, I'm not saying it's easy.
right.
Same time, how many times do we look? I can't tell you. How many times I've had friends that have gone through a massive tragedy on the surface that you would say is massive tragedy. And yet years later, you talk to them and they go, man, that thing made all the difference in my life.
Mhm.
I wouldn't give it up. Like I wouldn't go back and undo it because it changed me in a way that I never could have counted on. So if that kind of perspective can be gained through a massive tragedy, how do we assess negativity or a negative association with something that's somewhat trivial, right?
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
burn energy being mad about something that's somewhat trivial or even moderately negative, right? Like I
Yeah.
lost
Yeah.
my job. Like that's a big deal, right? People got to pay bills and all these things, right? Loss of a job is a big deal. And yet a lot of people come through that and go, wow, I never would have found
Best thing that happened to
that
me.
thing that I never would have seen it, never
Yeah.
would have found it. It literally changed my life. Losing that job changed my life. And yet in the moment, I was just devastated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could say that from my own story, even as recent as last year, and wound up writing a book about a lot of it too, where walking through just some very desperate trials where I didn't think I was going to come out on the other side. And I'm on the other side now and going, you know what? Now that I look back at it, I wouldn't change it for anything because all those series of quote unquote negative events have put me where I am today. And if those things didn't happen to me, then I don't know if I would be where I am today, and it's in a much better spot. I was talking to Austin one time, and he was telling me his girlfriend has this great quote. She said, and she's from, I think, from Seattle, Washington, where it rains a lot. And she told him, and this is what he told me. He said, what she says all the time, there's beauty in the rain as well.
Mm,
There's beauty in the sun, in the sunshine, but there's beauty in rain too,
mm,
and it's a matter of perspective and
yeah,
play on words. And I want to bring it back to something you said earlier about making challenges our friends, that
mm,
we walk with it, not looking at it as an adversary, but rather as an opportunity for us to grow into the next iteration of ourselves,
yeah,
as opposed to taking it as something that's happening to me, which is the victim mindset,
yeah,
and then looking at it as something that is happening for me with the opportunity of growth. And you're right, we're not downplaying it. Sometimes life throws us hard crap.
yeah,
You get hard shit coming our way, and it's like, well, you know what? Okay. You know what I have to remind myself? This too shall pass.
yeah, yeah.
It's a season.
You know,
It's a season. It's not gonna last forever. It's a season.
you think about your story and that, like you said, that challenge, that the darkness, the chaos that you went through and how dark, and yet then you write a book and you think about that book now is going to touch however many people it's going to touch, and you might save a life. It might save a life that is like essential to uncovering some thing in the world that we needed. And without that thing, without your story touching that person that saves
Yeah.
that life, that leads to that thing, we don't know the ripple effect of that, right? And so that's why it's like that was your part of your hero's journey, right? You're in the
Right.
darkness, bumping around, like why and how is this? And yet it's like in those dark moments, having the ability to say, use me, like man, this sucks. And
Yeah.
yet use me. Like, what am I taking to the world
Yeah.
from this
I
darkness?
You
Right.
know what though, Eric, in all honesty, I didn't think about that while I was in it. I
Yeah.
was just in survival.
Right on.
And the thing about the beginning of my journey when I was really at that darkest point, I had Austin as my coach right in the beginning to walk with me while I was going through that. God brought him to me at the right
Mm,
time, at the right space. Even he didn't recognize at the time how critical and important his role was going to play in my life. At that point, I just was going 1 hour at a time. I
right.
almost felt like a recovering alcoholic, even though
Mm,
that's not where my battle was. It was just a hour by hour by hour. And then eventually it became, okay, I've just got to take this day and get through this day.
right.
And then as we continued to coach, as he continued to help me fill my toolbox with ways to grapple with and cope with the things that were coming my way, those hours that turned into days turned into, okay, I'm just going to get through this week. And
Yeah.
now it's just going to get through this month. And so as the time frame became wider, longer, I realized, oh wait, there is there is the sunshine.
Mm,
There is, the sun will always come up tomorrow. There will always be another sunrise, and I get one more day,
yeah.
one more day to try it and do it again. One more day.
Yeah, I love it.
So, yeah.
Mm.
Eric, this has been an awesome conversation. I really enjoy talking to you.
Likewise too. Yeah, we keep going for
Yeah,
all day. Yeah,
yeah,
for
we
sure.
could.
It's
We
easy
yeah, we
conversation.
could. Yeah, we could. So, I ask all my guests the same 3 questions. One's easy, one's a Pandora's box, and one
Mm.
is practical. So, let's go with the easy one. What's a book or resource that's had a significant impact on you? And I realize there's probably a ton of them. What's the first one that comes to mind?
Yeah, it's easy. You're right. It's an easy question, right? So, The Alchemist, right, written by Paulo Coelho, and
Love it.
it's the hero's journey, right? So, we've talked a lot about it on our talk today. It outlines the hero's journey. I always recommend people read that book, and then I recommend that when you read it, don't read it as an observer. Read it from the viewpoint of the shepherd, right? So it's a fable. It's told from about this shepherd who goes on his own hero's journey, but read it in his shoes as if it's you, and see what comes out for you, right? See what lessons come out. It's to me, it's one of those books that you read over and over. It's a great book. That's one. Another couple that just come to mind. I'll throw a couple bonus ones in there. So Michael Easter, The Comfort Crisis is one. We talked about doing hard things. He talks in that book a lot about how, as a society, we've lost touch with struggle, and as we've lost touch with struggle, we've become more and more anxious and more frail.
Mhm.
We live in 72-degree air, climate control. I can order food, have it show up at my door. I can watch any movie I want to watch at any given time. I
Yeah.
don't have to wait. I have my refrigerator full of food. There's no struggle for food or survival like we've had for really most of human existence, except for the last 100 years or so. Um, and it's, you look at the detrimental health impact to that. So his thing is do hard things. On a regular basis. And my dog's like having some kind of dream over here. She's squeaking. Um, so yeah, do things on hard things on a regular basis as they teach us to feel alive, right? It reminds us of who we are when we struggle, and then you can rest and go, "Wow, that was awesome! Look what I did," and the hormonal benefit of that, of endorphins and things like that. So, and he recommends doing one really hard thing called a Masogi once a year. Masogi is by definition, you're not 100% sure you can finish it. It's that challenging, and yet you're not going to die. Like rule one is don't make it so hard that you're going to die or there's a chance of death. So don't do that. But then two, make it hard enough that you question if you can get it done and put that on your schedule to do once a year. And so I think that's a great book to read. Some really good stories in there, good lessons in there. Those are two. There's a third one I was going to recommend, or I'll go recommend it. So one is it's The Gap in the Gain.
Oh, great
It's
book.
yeah, great book because it talks in there about how high achievers are some of the most unhappy people because you're constantly looking at the horizon, like what's the next thing I've got to go accomplish? Okay, I'm going to go get it. And yet if you think about the horizon, it's always an equidistant away. It's always out
Mhm.
in the future. You never get there. It's just another set of goalposts to go get. And so high achievers tend to be, while they achieve a massive amount of stuff, they're always in this grind mode of I just got to get to the next goal and then I'll be happy. And they never get there
Right.
versus set that great goal, but then draw your strength and your inspiration and your joy by looking at the gain. Look back from where you started. And so if you're trying to learn to play the piano and you're a month in and you're still terrible and you're like, I'm still not a concert pianist. Well, look back to the first lesson you took where you didn't even know what the keys meant, right? And think about how far you've come just in a month's time and use that as inspiration for, wow, look how much I've grown to this point. That gives me fire and drive to be able to keep going and joy in where I'm at on the journey, right? Not just going to get joy at the end because there never is an end. So that's another great book. Yeah, those are three books. I think that's
They're all great. I read 2 out of the 3, so I'll have
yeah.
to dive into the middle
Michael
one.
Easter. Yeah, he just
Yeah,
dropped.
Michael.
He just put out another book, a new one. And I'm drawing a blank on the name. I pre-ordered it. I'm drawing a blank on it. But anyway, yeah, Michael
Got
Easter,
it.
great
Michael
book.
Easter, okay. Second question. What is one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic?
Hmm. So that's a deeper one. So we've talked about faith, and God on this call and this conversation. And I would say, for me personally, I have always been a Christian. I was born Catholic. I'm still a proud Roman Catholic. I love my Catholic faith, and yet at the same time, I really am leaning more into talking about my faith And it's interesting because Penn and Teller, the magicians, I think they're in Vegas. I think they're magicians, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, the big guy, which I always confuse if it's Penn or it's Teller.
One of them talks and the other doesn't. I
Yeah.
remember watching them on
The small
Saturday Night
one.
Live. I'm
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
back 30 years. I mean,
Yeah.
they've been around a long time, and I
I
can't
didn't
think.
get that stick for a long time. I'm like, why is that one guy never talk? But that's the stick, right? He never talks. The one
Yeah,
guy does talk, the other guy does not. But at first I
right.
thought maybe he's just shy or something. Like the first time I saw them, this is going back, like you said, Saturday Night
Yeah,
Live or Johnny Carson or something.
yeah.
And but no, that's part of the routine. But anyway, the tall guy, the one who talks, is an atheist, right? He doesn't believe in God. And yet he's had people, he'll do a show and people bring him a Bible, and he always takes it very graciously. And he's like, why would I turn that away? It's a gift. If that person believes what they say they believe and they didn't share it with me, man, they're like the cruelest person on the planet, right? If they
Mm,
if they truly believe that there's everlasting life through Jesus Christ and a belief and faith in God, and they're not sharing that with me, an atheist, they're terrible. So I have to accept this gift with humble heart and go, thank you. I don't believe it, but thank you. And I get why you're sharing this. And that's awesome. And I thought, that's a call, right? We're called to share the faith. And so I'm working at sharing it more, right? Sharing my belief, my passion, my love for the Lord, and just putting that out there. And so, what question could you have asked? We could have dove. We could have a whole discussion about faith, right?
just
But
that
yeah,
it's another podcast.
yeah, it's
I love
another
asking the question because then usually I wind up getting another
another
podcast
show,
out
right?
of it. Yeah, come
Right.
out. Yeah, come on another show. But I can relate to the faith end as well. I've been a Christian probably 25 or so years, and I've always struggled with that faith component in sharing your faith
Mm,
because the church I was part of, they were like, go out to the mall and just pick
mm,
a random person and tell them. And I always struggled with that because I always felt like I had to live out my faith in front of people for them to see it
mm,
before I could share it with them
right.
versus just finding somebody cold
Yeah.
turkey. But I there's stories out there of people are like, yeah, somebody handed me a water bottle and then I got saved. And I'm like,
Right.
you know what? That was just God at work
Yeah.
behind the scenes to begin with anyway, and use that person with that bottle of water. So I don't know. I think it's yes, sharing your faith. Yes, I think there's a level of discernment that
Yeah.
goes with that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah,
So it's
agreed.
a very
You
interesting,
gotta live it.
very interesting. Yeah, you have to live it
Because you're
too.
watching your actions more than your words for sure.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. Eric, as we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Mm. I would say if you've got something in your mind that is scary to you and yet it stays there, right? So, like for me, it was this idea of leaving a corporate role and doing my own thing and stepping out in faith and trusting that. That was scary. That was scary. And I hung on to that fear and for quite a while before actually acting on it. I would say if there's something that's scary to you, and then you apply that toward your core values, right? So we've done this whole discussion about core values and you've looked at it to say, is this good? Is it really something maybe good that aligns with my core values, but I'm afraid because I don't want to fail or I don't want people to judge me or whatever it might be, and you're holding back. Take the step, right? Do the thing, take the risk, and acknowledge, man, I'm going to fail miserably, and it's highly likely I'm going to fail, but I'm going to learn something in that failure that I never counted on. And so I'm taking it on just for that alone, right? Just for that. I'm not taking it on so I can be a hero or rock star or winner. I'm taking it on because I believe it aligns with my core values and I believe I'm going to learn something. And I have no idea where it's going to end up. Take that step. Whatever that thing is, take that first step and take some action toward that thing. And I think it'll lead to an entirely different tomorrow.
That's great advice. Goes right along. Small steps, big wins. I love it, Eric. Thank you so much for the gift of your time. How can people find you?
Great question. EricSardina.com. So my first and last name all strung together is my website, EricSardina, EricSardina.com. That's the easiest place. It's not always 100% up to date, but it's pretty good. It's all my
It's a
LinkedIn
good
and all that
start.
stuff. But LinkedIn's another one. Like LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on. Just my name, Eric Sardina, and then Instagram is the other one, and which also goes to Facebook. So the whole meta thing. So it's Eric_Sardina 26.2 is my handle. So at Eric_Sardina
And we'll
26.2.
put it on the notes
Yeah.
too.
Try
Yeah,
to
it's
keep
all
track.
good. I always like to ask it anyway in case somebody's listening and they're curious. Well, Eric, again, thank you for the gift of your time. It's been an amazing conversation.
Thank you, Sue. I really enjoyed it as always. We could keep going forever. And so I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, there will be.
Have a great day. Thanks, Sue.
You too. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me, and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Until next time, love yourself, then love others. Peace.